It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this program. My name is Bee Banyu, and I'm chair of the Food Studies program here at the New School. Let me introduce you to our program. We offer degree programs in food studies, 4-year BA and BS, and a 2-year AAS. Some of the good news is that we also offer a range of classes that are available to the public through what we call Open Campus. If you're interested in taking courses with us, next semester in the spring, we are offering, in particular, for example, food and migration. We also have an array of special programs, including this one that we're co-sponsoring with the Times. Next semester, we'll have a conference on food writing, which we are preparing in April. Check our website for more information. So with that, I introduce you to our next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Weinstein. I direct our events for subscribers. How many of you are subscribers? Raise your hands. Oh, that's great. And how many of you have been to one of our events before? So first, I'd like to thank the subscribers. We made this program tonight for you. I would also like to thank everyone else who's here. We're so happy you're here. Our programming strives to be a window into the newsroom. We strive to give you the stories behind the stories and to bring the best of what's in the building outside. So I couldn't be happier to be here to introduce Jenna Wortham, who is a staff writer for the magazine, and Wesley Morris, critic at large. They are hosts of the podcast Still Processing. And they're in conversation tonight with Samin Nosrat. Before they take the stage, you are going to see a brief peek at what they're going to be talking about. So I hope to see you soon and enjoy the show.
Hi.
Hello.
Coming on a Friday.
Thanks for coming on a Friday. Although I do think 6:30 is a generous,
It's
like,
early. It's,
kick the
yeah.
weekend off right time.
yeah, it's a transition moment.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'm Jenna Wortham.
I'm Wesley Morris. And this is Samin Nosrat.
So we're assuming if you're here, you know who Samin is, but I wanted to read her bio anyway because it's mad flossy, and we should just celebrate for a moment. So here we go. Samin Nosrat is a writer, teacher, and a chef. Her New York Times best-selling first book, holler, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, received the James Beard Award for Best General Cookbook and was named Cookbook of the Year by the International Association of Culinary Professionals. It's a big deal. Called The Next Julia Child by NPR's All Things Considered, Samin has been cooking professionally since 2000, when she first stumbled into the kitchen at Chez Panisse restaurant. An Eat columnist for the New York Times Magazine, where we all work, Samin lives, cooks, reads, and gardens in Berkeley, California.
Hey.
Hi, Samin. Okay, so
I'm blushing. I'm sitting here with my heroes.
Oh,
I'm sitting here with one of my, well, two of mine actually.
yeah, you better.
Yeah,
Like,
understood.
Get it right.
I just want to talk about, I think the relationship that most of us have to our food is to cooking our food is pretty basic, right? I mean, my version of that is like what some less good version of what my parents and friends did. And, you know, in my family, we didn't use books to cook. It was what somebody told you from like 1872. I mean, in my family, that is literally the truth. It is stuff that's been written down a little bit. Like, does anybody know do you know what a hermit is?
Baked good?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
So hermits, right? Like, I know how to make a hermit because somebody from 1872 who was related to me made hermits. Probably for some white people.
Right, I was gonna say,
Almost
like,
certainly for
I'm
some
like,
white people.
there's a whole other layer
We
to the
probably
story.
didn't get to eat the hermits,
Maybe the scraps.
But now you can.
but now I can.
Now you
But
can.
this recipe was handed down not in book form, but just orally until my mother put them in a cookbook, some cookbook she had when she died that she got from her great-grandmother.
I love that.
Anyway,
Wow.
so there are a lot of like science-oriented things I don't understand. I just
Right,
do what my
right.
grandmother does.
Like we know
not
how
a
to cook
bad
way. No, of
certain
course
things,
it's not bad.
but not lots of things.
But there is a why. Like if you like, if I ask my grandmother, why, Granny,
Martha,
wh-
Miss
Mar-
Martha.
Martha Ann, why are you using all this butter? She will just say, the right answer because it tastes good.
Right.
But the sort of the science of why it tastes good and why butter is better to use than olive oil, which we never used in my family, and sort of cultural differences among nationalities and races and ultimately classes is something that I'm very much aware of, even when you don't explicitly bring it up in the book. And so it left me with a lot of answers to questions I didn't know I had. And that is a really valuable thing when you're trying to figure out what to eat for your meal. And you have a little philosophical orientation toward how you want to eat, if you have the luxury of it.
And there's one recipe of yours in particular that we bonded over. And also, it's funny, I mean, you write this e-column for the Times Magazine, which I read every week, and I love. We've talked about it on the show. But what really got me cooking, and one of my obsessions with your cookbook, is a recipe that we wanted to do a dramatic reading of here for a quick moment.
No.
Just a part of it, because it really does illustrate, one, the way you break down simple concepts, or I guess like pretty complicated concepts that help you understand how to build flavor, construct a dish, and then just do things every day, and they taste so good.
Yes.
And so anyone that's close to me in my life who's here tonight will not be surprised. This recipe involves beans and rice, because I'm obsessed with beans and rice, because of Wesley, because of this recipe.
Right. So this is adapted from your home, from your site and the home ec section of
Or like
your
from
site.
a while
That
back.
was a precursor of salt,
Yes,
fat, acid,
right.
heat. Yeah.
So I'm going to start.
Okay.
Wow, you guys dug deep.
We used
talked
the
about
shit
it a
out of this.
lot.
Like, it really,
Yeah.
this is how I
Yeah.
understood to use the book. Anyway.
Right. This is like what got us going. Ready, honey?
Yes. Heat a pan or small pot for which you have a lid, adding a splash of olive oil as it becomes warm.
I thought we were gonna do this in our sexy voices. No? It's okay, let's keep going. Sorry. Okay, I'll
That
just
is
do mine.
the sexy voice.
Oh, was that his? Okay, sorry. Anyway. Heart you. Pour in your rice and stir it around, letting it toast slightly and become lightly golden.
Is this why I don't come over to eat at your house?
You do always cook for me, it's true, actually.
I'm just going to keep my natural voice. When you're satisfied with how toasty the rice is, add the sofrito and stir. Then a pinch or two of ground or whole cumin seed.
Let that all fry together for a minute.
Add some salt, then add the measured out liquid.
Crank up the heat and bring it all to a boil, and then taste and adjust the salt.
It's probably going to need a lot of salt, folks.
This is pretty much your only chance to get the thing properly seasoned, because you want the rice to get seasoned from the inside. And the only way to do that is to ensure the liquid is absorbing as it cooks, ensure that the liquid it's absorbing as it cooks is properly seasoned.
You want to just be barely uncomfortable with how salty it is. Because of all that starchy rice is going to need more salt than you think to get seasoned to the right point.
You're warming up, I got you. If you don't salt it enough now, you can of course add more salt right before you serve it. But it won't be the same. It will never be the same. That's a Drake lyric, but it works here.
So I guess a natural place to start, given what we just read, is your relationship to salt.
Oh, I thought you were going to say rice. I have a good one of those, too.
Okay. Well, I mean, in keeping with, because people who are, has anybody watched the whole thing yet? It's not hard to do. It's extremely addictive. It's on Netflix.
Out now. Came out yesterday.
Yes. But I think one of the things that people are gonna like really not believe,
Yes.
because I watched it with a friend of mine who was like, "Oh my God, that's so much salt."
Yeah.
But you are clear to say every time you douse something in salt,
Add more.
add more. And it's not as much as you think it is. Can you talk about what you like? How you like? Where does your threshold for salt begin, and just like a real, true cultural misunderstanding on our part of where salt goes in our dish ends?
Okay, sure. So my mother is like a kind of an Iranian hippie, if you will. So I grew up, you know, she was always shopping at the natural food store, and she really, and in the 80s, when she was cooking for me as a child, she really believed that salt, like to have a low salt diet was really important. So she used very little salt, and I grew up with a relatively, let's say, bland palate. But I loved her food. She was a great cook. I didn't know anything else until I started cooking in the restaurants and started tasting. Well, it was really, and it tasted so good, and I didn't know why. And then I started working in the kitchen, and I would see these palmfuls upon palmfuls of salt go. And you have to remember, it's a scale thing, right? So they're making food for 40 people in these pots. It's not 4 people. So they're they're scaling up. But still, the idea that like, I could make a pot of polenta and bring a spoonful of it to my chef to taste, and I could be so far off that we'd have to walk back to the pot, and he'd put 3 more handfuls in there.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, I thought I got an A- on this test, but actually I got an F. Like, I was so far off. So I had to adjust my expectations. And the thing is then I also started to learn that salt, not all salts are created equal, right? So, and the one that I like to use for dramatic flair, and also because it's a very forgiving salt, is called Diamond Crystal kosher salt, which is really, it's very flaky and light, and by weight, it's much, you know, salt is like a tablespoon of Diamond Crystal, and a tablespoon of Morton's kosher salt, and a tablespoon of table salt, or a tablespoon of coarse salt. The tablespoon, the volume, is not the measurement, like, because salt is
Oh, interesting.
equally salty by weight, not by volume. And so that's this fundamental flaw in American recipe writing, is 1 tablespoon or 1 teaspoon of salt is meaningless.
Right.
Because you might have a different salt at your house than I have at my house. So I view it as my job to teach you how to taste, so that you can, first of all, decide for yourself and make those choices for yourself. And secondly, not rely on these weird numbers. So yes, I use this Diamond Crystal. I do it with like a plum in the episode. Certainly I was watching the short ribs thing too,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is a lot. But
looks
they
great.
were, but I will say
great.
they're really big short ribs. They're very fatty. And that salt is just not that salty. So it takes a lot to make it taste right. And I mean, we ate it and we weren't faking. It was so delicious. So, I think it's important to help people understand a lot of the time you're like kind of exponentially off, not just a little bit.
Yeah.
If you want your food to taste like mine, which maybe you don't, so that's fine too. Yeah.
You just said something that we talk on the show a lot about, which are like misconceptions around various cultures and misconceptions around food culture. But you were talking about growing up and that your mom had this idea about a low sodium or low salt food diet, which feels very much of that moment. And so much of how we eat now is guided by trend and like popular media,
know.
like Instagram. And
I
so
know.
I'm just curious, what other, I don't know, are there other types of food misconceptions that you're interested in breaking down, that you feel like come through in the work?
I'm not a nutritionist, so I can't say like with total certainty that any one thing is right or wrong. But it does seem to be like you can't go wrong, you can't eat too many vegetables. Right? Like, and that's my goal every day, is to eat as many vegetables as possible. And I think everything else in relative moderation. And that's the thing, is like, you see me salt a pot of water, but 99% of that goes down the drain.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not consuming
Which
everything.
you say
you
in the
use.
show, which is
Yeah.
a great
And
thing to
so, you know, you're not like, and also, I want you to be more comfortable cooking at home, and so that you cook more often at home. And in general, anything you cook at home is more healthy for you than anything you will ever eat out or like buy processed. So it's hard, it would be hard to have, also some people have kidney issues and blood pressure issues, and those people should listen to their doctor, not me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what are some misconceptions? I mean, is there anything that comes to mind?
That's like, I'm like, you're wrong.
Well, not when you're not. I don't so much.
Or like
mean,
cultural ones.
Cultural ones.
Yeah.
I think the salt one is probably the biggest one. I mean, fat is this thing that we keep changing, right? We're always like, fat's bad, fat's good, fat's bad, fat's good. So that one, I don't know, just eat the right amount. Like, I don't know. What are some that you can think of? The wheat one's really intense right now, like, and it's complicated because I do think there's some validity to it and soy too. Wheat and soy have been so hybridized and like genetically modified over the last several generations. Their bodies don't really understand like when we eat commodity wheat. I don't think that our bodies have evolved at the rate that these things have been modified to really digest it properly. I do think there is some truth to all the like gluten discomfort that we have.
Right.
But I also think sometimes you just want to eat a piece of toast, right? Like, yeah.
Can we back up for a second and just explain? I want to know how the Samin of 2018 got from the Samin of like 1980, whatever. So, where did you grow up? And well, why don't we just start there?
I grew up in, so my family is from Iran. My parents came to San Diego in the mid-'70s. I don't know exactly when because no one in my family tells me anything. It's a typical immigrant thing, right? Yeah. And I was born in 1979. I grew up in like suburban San Diego. I ate a lot of fish tacos, a lot of pizza, and my mom's perfect, delicious Iranian food. I was a super awkward kid, like throughout everything. I mean, I'm still pretty wacky, but I think I just fully embody it now, whereas it used to make me feel really uncomfortable because I was so different from, imagine, like, San Diego is pretty, like, suburban San Diego is pretty white.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out, I was always just trying to be the best kid I could possibly be, and often that meant getting the best grades,
Right.
or just pleasing the parents and pleasing the elders, and then so that meant I was going to be a doctor because all Iranian children should be doctors. And then in 11th grade, I had this amazing English teacher who was like, "You can write. You can write. You should be a writer." And so he really, kind of broke something. And so by then I was like, okay, I'm going to be an English major. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a poet. So I came to Berkeley. I moved to Berkeley to go to college, and I was an English major. I was like, I'm going to be a poet. I took a poetry class my sophomore year with Bob Hass, the poet laureate.
yeah.
It was so amazing. And like the third week, this boy stood up with rosy cheeks and a beard and brown hair. And it was so beautiful. And he said, I don't even remember what poem we were talking about, but he like stood, and Robert Frost of some kind, really. And he said like the most thoughtful, beautiful thing. And I was like, I love you. So I stalked him a little bit, and
As one does.
and eventually revealed my crush, and eventually he broke down and became my boyfriend, and
Yes. Shout.
and he grew up in San Francisco. He also loved to eat, and so we spent a lot of our time eating together. And he had always wanted to eat at Chez Panisse Restaurant in Berkeley, which is at the Alice Waters Institution, found in the House of Seasonality. It's sort of the temple to farm-to-table dining in this country. And I didn't know any of that, because this was 1997, 98. It was before blogs, really, food blogs. It was kind of before the internet, it was before food celebrity on the internet. It was before, at that time, the Food Network had 3 shows. It was just a different time. To be a cook, to be interested in cooking, had no cultural cachet in the same way at all. So for me, it was just, I was like, okay, let's save up. So we saved our money. For 7 months, we saved $220. We had a shoebox, quarters, laundry change, whatever. And then we made a reservation to go to Chez Panisse, which he had always wanted to go to. And on the day of, we went to the bank and traded the money for 200s and a 20.
Yes. I love that.
And we drove up in his car, which was a metallic turquoise convertible VW Bug, and I was wearing a black tank top and denim skirt.
You remember
Oh, I remember
All the
everything.
details.
And we went in and we had this dinner, and Chez Panisse is divided in two. It's a more informal cafe upstairs that you can order a la carte off the menu, and then the more formal downstairs, which has a fixed menu. And so we went down there, and we were very out of place. Like, we were younger by decades, like totally scrappy looking. I think we had a friend who was a busser who had told them we were coming, so they were like apprised of our
Situation.
awkwardness. Yeah.
These people are gonna come in,
Yeah.
maybe young and hungry looking.
Yeah.
They have
So-
money, I promise.
And it was really just this incredible experience where I had never been to a fine dining restaurant. I had never been to a restaurant where like everything is thought about. Everything is considered and beautiful and smells good and looks beautiful, and the like lamps on each table were handmade copper. At the time I didn't know, but made by like a woodworker, metal worker on staff. Like everything in that restaurant, the flower displays are the most gorgeous, like changed. There's an on-staff florist in that restaurant. That doesn't happen anywhere else.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it is a temple to the senses. It is an incredible experience. And so here I was, and a lot of it went over my head, and I didn't understand what was happening because I had no idea. But also, it felt like being in someone's home where I was being so cared for. And they, we never ran out of bread and butter. We never ran out of water. The glass was always full. The minute the fork went down, the plate was taken away. They were just so attentive, and that was really special. And the dessert was this chocolate souffle. And so we had this. They brought me, and she was like, maybe suspected that I had never had a souffle before. I don't know why. And so she was like, would you like me to show you how to eat it? And I said, yes. And so she poked a hole in it. Or she said, you poke a hole in it with your spoon, and you add the sauce, and you take a bite, and that way every bite has sauce. So I did that, and it was amazing. And she said, how is it? And I was like, it could really use a glass of cold milk. And so, because it's like a hot chocolate thing and a cold milk thing, right? You want that thing. And she kind of laughed, because I don't think she'd ever been asked for a glass of cold milk before, and she went and brought me one, and she brought us each a glass of dessert wine. And only later did I realize, like, it's super rude to tell the person in your restaurant, in the place, like, how their thing could be better. And then also, it's also considered totally uncouth in like European fine dining to drink milk after 10 a.m. Milk is for babies. So that's why like in France and Italy, if you order a cappuccino at like 2 p.m., they're like, ugh, Americans, so like it was just, I fully, if she didn't already know. So, but it was so moving that I wrote this letter, and I brought it back to her, and I asked for I brought it back to ask for a job, and they said, oh, you have to bring that to the floor manager. She's the one who hires bussers. So they brought me over to her, and the floor manager was the souffle lady. And I also believe that she was probably very desperate. So she hired me on the spot, and I started the next day, which was, I think, the 28th birthday of Chez Panisse. So like, it was just a magical, everything aligned, and I fell in love with the kitchen and with cooking, and I begged them to teach me how to cook. And it took a while, and I started to see these patterns in the kitchen, because every day the menu changed, and the chefs, they didn't really ever use recipes, yet they had told me to go read cookbooks and study, tradition and history. And so what I was reading in the books was not being reflected at all in what we did, because they never measured anything or timed anything really, or, it was just, or even really cared so much what the precise temperature was. And it really mind-boggled me for a while, until I started to see that no matter what we were making, we always attended to salt, fat, acid, and heat. And so I went to one of the chefs, and I said, oh, I think I figured this out. Like, we're always tasting and paying attention to these 4 things. And he said, yeah, we all know that, duh. Like, and I was like, you could have told me I've had a headache for like 2 years. And so, so at that point, I realized if this is something these guys all know, but it's not in any of these books, then I need to make a book, to connect the dots for other people. And it took a mere 17 years to do that. So, so I kept cooking and traveling, and I never let go of the dream of writing. And one night Michael Pollan came in to eat at a restaurant where I was working, and he is the great writer of The Omnivore's Dilemma and former New York Times Magazine, contributor, and he just really was a person that I really looked up to. The way that he wrote about food was really so intelligent and impressive to me. And so I wrote him a card, and I said, can I please come audit your class? And I gave it to the server to give to him when he came in for dinner that night. And he wrote me back 3 weeks later and said, come talk to me. And at first he didn't want to let me in his class. And then, but I like persisted and he let me in. And I could tell, because I'm a crazy person who stalks people, it pays such close attention to things. I could tell that he followed in his career the academic method, like where he would write an article, often for the Times Magazine, a big long form thing that would become the base chapter of the next book. And in 2009, he wrote this piece that was called Out of the Kitchen and Onto the Couch about Julia Child. It was when that Julie and Julia movie came out.
Yep.
And it recited these statistics about how Americans watch more cooking television per day, more minutes than they do cooking. They spend cooking. And yeah, I mean, I think that's probably,
That seems right.
Especially if yesterday you watched 3 hours of my show, yeah.
And I didn't cook.
And so I was like, oh, he's going to write a book about this, and he's going to need a cooking teacher because he's an experiential journalist. So I was like, can I be a cooking teacher? And later, 2 months later, he was like, I have an idea. I think you should be my cooking teacher.
Oh, one of those.
Amazing.
Omnivore's dilemma indeed, Mr.
No, it was amazing. So we worked together, and he picked up on my obsession with these 4 things, and he really encouraged me to turn it into a book. And I mean, that's easier said than done. That was probably 2010, and it took till 2017 to get it published. But yeah, so sorry, and then now I'm here.
Oh, that was great.
I just realized I gave you like a 15-minute
That's the
answer.
right answer.
That's what I wanted to know. Well, what did your parents say when you were like, I got a job as a busser in this kitchen?
Ooh, they were not stoked.
Yeah. I mean, now they're happy, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I recently, last week, Netflix let me know that they were going to do this big marketing plan with like a billboard in Times Square and 2 in LA. And I called my mom. I was like, Mom, like here's the addresses of the LA billboards. And I wrote back to everyone at Netflix. I was like, now maybe my mom will understand what I do. I don't know.
But she's in the Heat episode. I mean, did
Yeah.
she?
She didn't. No, you guys, during the filming, so she came up and like producers had called her. They had flown her there. We had talked. She knew she was cooking it on camera with me, and we're filming the scene, and she's having a grand old time. And then she stops in the middle of the scene and turns to Caroline Stu, the director, and is like, Caroline, who do you work for? And Caroline's like, I work on this show. Like, this is my job. I work on this show. And my mom was just trying to process. She's like, but whose show is this?
Right.
Because it couldn't be hers.
And I got super petulant, and I was like, it's my show, Mom! Like,
Oh, I love that.
that person not in the show.
There is a great moment though when you and your mom are making tahdig and you're complimenting her technique, and you're like, oh, this is a great way to do it, and she's like, yes, it is. Like, I know. And I was like,
I think it's like from what I hear from the feedback, well, I wanted my mom because I just knew, I was like, yes, it will be an emotional sacrifice to bring my mother into my workplace, but this will make amazing television, you know?
It was good.
Like, it's really good to see the professional person being like put down, you know what I mean? The mom being like, you're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, this isn't ruining anything for anybody who hasn't seen this.
There are no
yet,
spoilers in a cooking show. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Like, what's your...
Oh, I know about the spoiler thing anyway, so no one dies,
It's
there's
true.
no deaths.
It's true. Right.
Well, there's some pigs.
yeah.
There's some pigs. Sorry, y'all. Some pigs do die.
Yeah.
There's this great moment in that episode where you are talking, and then it's just like, as a professional movie watcher, you look for these moments that are just not what you get in a normal anything show. And there's this in the background, because I'm a depth of field person, and this is a beautiful looking show. The camera, you've just never seen anything look as good as anything looks on this show. There's this moment in Samin's kitchen where she is facing, I don't know.
I'm like sitting at the dining. I'm sitting at the dining table, just like talking about the philosophy of throwing a dinner party.
So while Samin is like philosophizing about how to entertain, behind her there's just some person who's just like. She just like walks from one room to the other. It's another room in the house, and it's like, I mean. If we're gonna give this moment a genre, it's horror. because you don't know what, who was that? And
Do you want to shout at the screen like, turn around, it's me, behind you? I mean,
There's a woman who
you know.
looks just like you who just walked through your living room in an apron. As it turns out, it's Samin's mom. But somebody says, you hear off camera, somebody says,
Your mom, you
Your
gotta
mom-
sit there. She's like, you gotta stop. Your mom just. I'm sorry, Mom.
it was great. It was, I mean, it was actually
fantastic.
one of the funniest things
Yeah,
I've ever
it
seen.
was.
Because it also, to me, the reason that it was funny was because it seemed to also illustrate an aspect of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where like she just didn't give a fuck.
No.
Right.
It's like, you know that everyone was quiet. She was told to stay in a place, but she was like, I'm just gonna go explore. Like, that's my mom. It's cool. Yeah. It was cool too because I was on like a really good. It was whatever I was saying was so good, and then the moment was over.
It just seemed like that's the relationship right there. Where like the mom just sort of comes on through.
She's
But
in
in
charge.
general, like how, like just how our mothers have like ultimate pride and respect, and but then also zero for us. Like they're just like, I don't care. Like I brought you here. I will take you off of this planet. I'm doing what I want. You're like, respect.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's fine.
Had you guys cooked together before?
It's
Yes.
very limited times because it's very stressful for me. Well, my mom, I don't think she thinks I'm that good of a cook. She's an incredible Persian cook. Like, and so the taste for me of Persian cooking is her cooking. So anytime I'm trying to make something, I want it to measure up to hers. And so I do ask her for her advice and watch what she does and ask a lot of questions. But, you know, I also have fancy cook techniques that often are a lot more efficient than her way. And so I have invited her before to come cook like special Persian dinners with me. And it's like literally, I had to go to therapy like 9 times after I was done because it's like you know, I don't know. I mean, some people think I'm a pretty good cook, but she's like, no, you're doing that. Like, why would you ever brown the lamb in this way? It's not supposed to, you know, it's too stressful when I'm under pressure and I need to deliver. Maybe if I just cooked with her in a no-stress environment where we were just cooking dinner for ourselves, that would be better. Maybe I need to try that. I'll ask my therapist.
Yeah, is cooking a coping mechanism for you? Is cooking meditative? Is it,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, you know, even just the other day, I was getting very anxious last week, partly because of our job at the magazine. There's this story I'm working on that's killing me. And, and partly because of this. Yeah, and I had a moment, and I had one day where I had to go run a couple errands, and then I was come home and pack to come to New York, and I knew I had like a 3-hour block, and I was near this house where a bunch of my friends do private cooking for a wealthy family, and they were cooking a wedding that day, and I just knew that if I went there and I stood in the kitchen with them, that I could like totally zone out, get out of my head. And they would and I went there and they were like, we need you to peel 200 tomatoes perfectly. And I was like, thank you. And so there is a way where like the physicality of it, the repetition of it, like getting to stand there. I mean, at this point, it's also a really beautiful social thing for me when I get to do it professionally. At home, sometimes, it depends what mood I'm in. If it's Tuesday afternoon and I'm really tired and I got home from work, I don't think of it as particularly meditative. But sometimes it shifts into that, like the minute the onion starts browning and the house fills with that smell. But I definitely am like no Zen master of cooking. It's just that when I'm given a big pile of tasks, it's nice to be able to do something that your body just knows how to do. And you don't have to think, because I'm an overthinker. I'm very neurotic. I don't know if you've noticed. Yeah.
Well, but you talk about it a lot, and you know, I've listened to a lot of interviews that you've done, like with Tim Ferriss, and then there was a food diary of yours that I read, or maybe it was like you were like, someone was like, how do you start your day? You were like, with my antidepressants. And
Totally.
I was like, I feel like we have to talk about.
Yeah, we got to talk about
Life
it.
is stressful.
It's really
It
stressful.
is stressful in general, and especially if your identity lies at any intersection of many of ours up here do. And so I don't know, I really commend you for how much you talk about wellness and mental health and sort of how you generally cope in the world.
I mean, and also like, I'm in a major time of transition right now, and I'm freaked out. Like I'm trying my best every day to drink my water, you know, and to like lay in bed and, yes, thank you. Oh yeah, and thank you.
Why don't we all,
Yeah, let's have a moment.
Hydrate.
you know what
Yeah.
they say, when one person drinks, everybody, somebody I'm sure in here just now just reach for some water they don't have.
And I'm trying to remember, because I also am I don't know about you guys, but like, I have made my way, I'm an achievement machine. Like, and I'm really good at it by now, but it's not the only, like, it's not everything, you know, and I don't want to, I want to have happiness. And I want to invest in my friends, and I want to be a normal person. I'm not normal, no, but I want to be a real person. I want to be happy, and it's not, you know, a person can like have a lot of goals and achieve them and still be the same person. And that's me. And so I'm still the same person, and I keep hitting up against that. So I'm like, well, what are the ways that I invest in myself and the community around me to become happier? And I'm still, I don't know, I'll be figuring that out till the end.
How would you characterize the transition? Or what is it?
Part of it is the, like becoming, like stepping up as becoming like suddenly a lot more public, in the public eye. I have a lot of anxiety about that. Or let's say ambivalence maybe is the word. And also, it's a weird thing. I have been like looking toward the next thing I want to achieve, the next thing I want to achieve, the next thing I want to achieve. And also, a lot of them have been, almost everything has been because I really care about it. So, but through every experience, I've learned so many things about, I just keep learning that for me, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's writing or cooking or whatever, that it's all, like my entire happiness is about who I'm surrounded by, and I only want to collaborate with like the most magical creative unicorns. And so, and you realize that, and I have made a lot of decisions, even like, let's talk very frankly about our employer. I've made a lot, like our employer.
Yeah, I mean,
Our employer like offered to me the opportunity to write a feature story, and I have not done that yet. And I was like, yes, a feature story. I'm going to be a person who wrote a feature story in the New York Times Magazine. I'm going to do that. Yes. And I have lived to regret it, because I made the choice because it was a feature story, and then not because it was the story that I cared about so deeply in my heart that I really wanted to write about. And also, I'm learning, like, I don't write I wrote a book that took forever, but like these stories, as a writer, you're a person who has to like, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but like, you have to,
because nobody's
different.
figured it
Yeah.
out. So.
But like, I was just having an amazing talk with a friend the other day, and she was like, this is what writers do, is they take like these things out of thin air, and they have to find a way to distill them and make some, you know, you have to look, think, see, and then find words to then explain that to somebody else. And that's a lot of work. And even when it's just about a burger or a tortilla, for me, because I try to find words that really express how it feels to eat a thing, or how eating a thing made me feel, or the senses around that. I have to get so clear in my body about what that experience felt like to then be able to put words in it, that it's really emotionally and sometimes physically draining. Like I sometimes have to lay on the floor in my office to like find the words for a tortilla. And so, and that's something, and so when I taking a story about something that I don't deeply, like am not deeply moved by, and also happens to be due the week that my internet show comes out, like was maybe not the best decision. And I made it from a place of like, I don't know, competitiveness, or, do you know what I mean? It wasn't because I was deeply motivated in my heart to do that. And now I'm just, the one amazing thing about transitionally is like, I'm learning, I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to do all those other things anymore. And that's an amazing feeling. Is like, I don't have to say yes because I think the opportunity will disappear. I don't have to say yes. Yeah, I just have to be so clear in my heart about saying yes, so that I won't regret it later and be like, why did I say
We talk about this all the time.
And saying no is the most powerful thing you can do as a person, or just in
Yeah.
general, just to be able to have that discerning power to be like, is this going to make me ultimately happy? You know, like that's actually a big moment. I read that you're a witch. No, I read that
I am,
you.
yeah.
I read that you could. This is making me think about this detail I read about you, which is that you have a manifestation journal.
Sure do.
Which speaks directly to me. And I want to know. So you've talked. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about it, but I'm really curious what you've put in it, and what's come true, and what you've put in it that has
Has
yet
changed or has yet. Okay. it's basically just a journal. I bought it at the art supply store 10 years ago. There's nothing fancy about it, and I wrote Manifestation Journal. I think I got the idea. I think it was like a New Year's type of thing, and I think I got the idea from like a self-help blog, maybe. And the idea was to write down what I maybe wanted to do or achieve or be or have, and see what happened from that. And so I think the first page had a lot of really specific professional goals, like I want to write this many books, have it be a bestseller in this way, blah, 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 buy a good house and get a good book. And then
I need a
yeah,
manifestation.
you got it. And there was also things like, get your chin hairs under control. Like, which I did. It took like 7 or 8 years, but I did it. And then, and then it was also like, I don't know, I mean, be a better sleeper. The thing I'm so embarrassed to admit, but I tell everyone, is in teeny tiny letters at the bottom of the first page, I wrote, MacArthur Genius Grant. And like, you know, it's like you can just be no one's going to read
It's
it
yours,
unless you
yeah.
tell
For
the
you.
whole wide world press. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
This is being recorded, just FYI.
it's cool. And so what has come true, I mean, sometimes I'm shocked by, I wrote an early list of publications that I would like to write for, and I've written for all of them. I wrote, you know, in very specific terms, the kind of book deal that I wanted, like how many figures, and it was that many figures. I wrote, I think I wrote about a TV show. I had that thought, the first time I thought about a cooking TV show, teaching people how to cook on a TV show was 2007, and I think around that time I like made a note in there about it. And then it happened. Also an astrologer, you'll like that. Have you heard about the astrologer? Oh
no,
yeah, after I sold the book in 2013, I was like, I'm gonna treat myself to an astrology reading with San Francisco's premier reader. And so,
That's what it says outside of her shop, actually. It's
San
like,
Francisco's.
for premier readers.
In what neighborhood is San Francisco?
well, she was at that time in the Mission, but now she has since moved to Oakland.
Okay.
And so,
Well,
yeah,
She's on trend.
yeah,
Or something. It's not even a trend.
Yeah.
Like, trend is on her.
yeah,
Right.
Jen is on it. But it was the kind of thing where there was a 6-month waiting list and it cost $250. I was like, well, whatever. And so, but I did it, and I went to go do it, and there was one spot, like, had been a cancellation, and it was coming up, it was on my birthday. I was like, I gotta go. So I went, and
The cancellation was magically
it
on
was
your
it was
birthday.
meant for me, yeah.
That's
So
great.
then I took it and I went, and she told me many things, and then she said, I said, do you see anything about my book? She's like, I see a film deal. And I was like, are you sure about that? And she was like, listen, you need to believe in yourself more. And I was like, I do believe in myself. This just isn't the kind of a book I could see like becoming a movie. And so she was like, no, and I was like, are you sure you don't see like a show? And she was like, no, I see a movie. And so I was like, okay. So then it became this joke with my agent and Wendy McNaughton, my illustrator, and our editor, where we all decided who would play us in the movie version. And I was Maya Rudolph, obviously.
Listen, get in line.
You want Maya Rudolph to play
I
you?
want my
Yeah.
Rudolph to play.
I think I can see that, yeah.
Well, you know, what's funny about that is on the way over here, after finishing, you know, I watched all 4 episodes, and I thought that one of the things that's great about this show, and great about a couple other food-oriented shows I like, is that there's something about the relationship among people and food that's really important. And I was thinking, as I was thinking this, I was also thinking about why the movies always get that wrong. Right? I can think on this one hand, I can think of, and I won't even use all the fingers, of movies that actually get the experience of food, some aspect of food and people, right? Whether it's procurement, cooking, preparation, or eating.
Is Eat, Pray, Love on your list?
No, but I thought about that while I watched the show, and I was like, if Ryan Murphy had just let Julia Roberts eat, like, just focus on the eat part. Because you notice when she eats in that movie, there's a cut, You never see her swallow. She just puts food in her mouth, and it never goes anywhere.
right.
Oh, wow.
It's just, they do this in the movies a lot, but Eat, Pray, Love is like, it's not eat, it's not swallow,
Yeah,
pray,
yeah,
love.
yeah.
So what's one on your
But she should be swallowing the food. Anyway.
what's one movie? What's a movie or a scene
I can think
on
of
your
one.
list? Yeah.
Moonlight. There's a
Oh my
lot
God!
of
the-
eating.
Like,
when
yeah.
he cups the rice
Yeah.
and you're just like,
And also, another, well, this isn't a movie, but a show I've noticed, I've been like watching a lot recently where I'm like, oh, they get food sort of amazingly right in this, is Billions.
Oh.
Yes.
I thought
Do
you were
guys-
gonna say Vita actually. But go
Oh,
on, but
Vita, well, let's talk about food. Remind me some food scenes from Vita. I
They're
mean,
just
there's
always
just always
getting
eating.
cart
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
in LA and
Yeah.
just
Oh my God,
like,
when she
yeah,
stops and
yes.
buys the thing in the first
yeah,
scene
with the
with the
chili and the
mango and the
mangoes and
chili.
the-
Oh, it's so
it's-
good.
yeah,
Gets
yeah.
interrupted
Yeah.
by the anti-gentrification.
Yeah,
movement. It's like,
yeah.
But what happened?
Moonstruck,
Moonstruck.
I think, is one of the greatest, like, accidental but on purpose food movies ever.
Okay.
There are things that happen in that movie that are specific to a particular type of Italian cooking. Do you remember this?
I don't remember it.
Anybody who has not seen Moonstruck, you should just see it. It is like one of our greatest romantic comedies. But it also has these great cooking scenes where Olympia Dukakis is
Love her.
just making something. And the most famous thing I think I can remember from that
love
movie
this.
is the cracked egg in the bread in the skillet.
Oh, the best.
And the camera
Bonnie
is
in the
lingered
basket or
on
the-
this. I don't know what that, I'd never seen it before.
It's a
British
But I don't like eggs, but that looked, I mean, I do, but not like that. But it just looked delicious. Another one is Big Night. That is probably the
Night.
one.
What movie is that?
Big Night is the Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub. They're brothers.
Okay.
They're cooking this big meal. I think it's kind of like a critic is going to come and eat at the restaurant.
Yeah, there.
okay.
And also, wasn't it a celebrity singer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
person was going to come and put the cherry on top of this meal at their place, and
on the list.
it is just it's a great. You just watch people make stuff, but kitchens in movies are just like they're abused. Like there's a chase sequence through a kitchen. There's a
Oh my
or like in
gosh.
action movies.
All of
there's
John Wick,
like the
the pans and the,
right.
the pots and the you're like,
Right,
oh.
well, that's a great sequence, but it's again,
Yeah.
it is not a great cooking sequence, right? And then, with what the movies do to markets, like if you want to.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God,
all-
Inception.
They do
when-
not. They do not respect
the
markets. Yeah.
And the people are always like, oh, but that's like a real. Like I feel mad. I'm like, linger on
Right,
that
yeah.
person more. Whose
All
basket
the
of
fruit.
herbs, all the fruits and the spices.
So anytime you go to a market on this show, I'm like, I hope Vin Diesel doesn't come
Yeah.
crashing through. But but this is just to bring.
Or the Rock.
Bring it back.
The
or
Rock just starts like rappelling down the side of a building. It's like slapping the sour oranges out
Oh
of
well, I
someone's
will say being at the Tokyo Fish Market kind of felt like that because it's so busy. It's so busy, and there's all these carts it's just total mayhem. It's
Yeah.
complete I'm sure people get run over by those carts all the time. Yeah.
This actually brings up something we were talking about. This is kind of sad, I'm sorry, but
No,
we were,
bring it up.
in watching that episode and watching the salt episode, when you guys see it, there's this part where you're talking about all the different ways that salt is used to build different bases, and I told you a moment ago that I love that episode because I don't feel like a fancy food person, but in watching you talk about all the different types of salts there are and how you can use them in all these ways, I like raced to my kitchen and I was like, I have 4 kinds of salt in here, so I felt very, and then we had a meeting and I was just like Googling salt cellars and people would like, ask me questions, I'd be like, but I was just like,
That's what you were doing today?
putting salt cellars in my cart. Yeah, because I'm like excited that I have all these different salts. But anyway, so speaking of the Tokyo Fish Market and thinking about in that episode when you're talking about, in Japan, like pulling salt from the ocean, and we're at this moment in culture, in our historical moment where we broke the planet and like
Yeah.
it's our fault. And Wesley and I were just talking about this idea of whether or not we're potentially in the last great food moment and what that means.
I took a climate change. I continue to audit. I'm such a dork. I still audit classes at UC Berkeley. And so maybe 4 years ago, I audited like a nature and poetry class. And they had an amazing climate change scientist come. And I'll never forget the image that he showed us of in 30 years what the West Coast will look like and what temperatures will be. And it was, for me, it clicked agriculturally because, especially because like you think of Napa and Sonoma and Northern California being this incredibly lush agricultural region that also like the land there is so expensive because of the wines and the vineyards, but in 30 years or less, the temperatures will be so hot that those grapes will have to be turned into raisins. They won't be able to be wine grapes. And so I just keep thinking about that. I'm like, what's going to happen to, and that's just one tiny place in one tiny.
I'll be alive then. Like, we took
and
30
we'll
years.
still be
I'm always
alive.
like, that's not my lifetime. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
wait.
and that's, and that was just one, that really is like a thing that I keep thinking about. It's just a good touchstone for me to then like refer to everything else about. And absolutely, it is sad and it is really overwhelming, and I don't really know what the answer is. I do know that agriculture in general, like large-scale agriculture, is a big contributor to, greenhouse gases, and so trying to encourage people to eat locally and understand their own foodways and food systems is important to me. But also, my role in the world, I believe, is as a cooking teacher, and so if I can just even convince you to cook once or twice or 3 times a week, then maybe you're not eating out, and that's less packaging. And like, I think I'm like small change. I'm a small change in big numbers kind of person. So that's what I hope to do. But it is, sometimes I just don't even want to think about it. Like,
But are chefs talking about it? Is it like,
well, we just had a big climate change summit in the Bay Area, actually, that Governor Brown put on, and it was all about actually incorporating people from the art world and from the cooking world, and like getting them to talk about how this is going to affect us all, and putting it into more concrete language for people in ways that affect their everyday lives. Because I think a lot of the time the concepts are so big that most people, it's easy to turn away, right? It's easy to be like, well, what's 2 degrees? Or, like, what's water coming up in the Keys? Who cares about that? Like, whereas I think when you're faced with photos, when you're faced with the way that the food that you taste will taste different. Your children will not get to taste those things. That's, I think, as a way to, like, help it land with people a little bit more. Yeah, but
I also don't know, I mean, I think maybe making this about things like food might actually make it more
accessible. Yeah.
Just because, I think part of the reason that one of the things that helps inure us to this inevitability is the way culture represents the end of the world. Or they represent this change as apocalyptic, when really, it probably won't be apocalyptic.
It probably won't be.
It'll just be
gradual and depressing.
there are some things you won't be able to get.
well, remember like a few summers ago, you couldn't get any limes in Brooklyn, and like you couldn't get like even the coconut, and people were like, where's my coconut? And I feel like that was the first time people were like, no limes, no coconuts, like started to understand.
No, but
you remember that in restaurants? And you were just like, this
Yeah.
is what it looks like, people. It's
Yeah.
like it was very.
it's not no food.
Yeah.
But
It's
only
like
for certain people.
$400 for
Yeah.
something that used to cost $2.
Yeah. And the thing with money and food is people do not like to pay more. And Americans, I would say, do not
interesting.
like to pay any more for their food than they're used to, than what it used to cost. And so it's really hard to convince people to pay more, and a lot of people can't afford to pay more. It's so complicated, right? Like the whole it's a systemic thing, but I don't know. Man, you're giving me a lot to think about. Can I just say something about you guys? Okay. Well,
I'm
I would
like,
say, because
anything
I listen very carefully to everything you ever say.
I'm sorry.
And I think about it a lot, like both in the small scale, but also I like to think about how you think, and I like to listen to how you guys put ideas together. It's really interesting and inspiring to me. And I think one thing that I've learned from listening to you is the importance of putting language to ideas, and that is a way that we can all start to have more conversations. That's something I've been thinking a lot about just in this world. Like, this article I'm writing about candy, it's all about putting language to what you're tasting.
You're doing the candy
candy issue.
Good. Okay, good. That's great.
And so I'm like,
The New York Times Magazine is doing an entire
issue about candy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's the article that's killing me.
Sorry to
I hope you like it, guys.
Yeah. It means like if I ever
But like,
finish it.
I think there's power in putting language to what we taste and how we sense, because then we are having to do the exercise of finding words for it, then makes you more familiar with it, which makes you able to seek what it is that you want, more precisely the next time. I think about it in terms of cultural appropriation, which is a phrase that if you had said that to me 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know that I would have known what it meant, but it's like it's a phrase that we are throwing around a lot these days, especially in the food world, and I think I feel very strongly about it as a subject, but also I think a lot of times because we have not, as a community, and developed a vocabulary about this idea that surrounds it, the term sometimes gets like things get lumped under cultural appropriation that might be just stupidity or thievery or something else that's not strictly, so the more we talk about it, the more language we can make for it.
Which in itself is like a type of mindfulness, right? And it's like kind of the reason I like to cook too. It's because when I'm not just like ordering something and like shoveling it while I'm doing something else and like into the feed hole, you know what I mean? I'm just like all the holes are being, it's like, but I don't know, in some ways I think a lot about like we kind of come at our show like, what are we curious about or what are we trying to be more thoughtful about, which is why we were, I don't know, it's like why we were so excited to talk to you because I feel like the way you think about food and the way you think about building recipes and just taking the time, I don't know, just doing it right feels very in line with what we're trying to do.
But can we go back to this question of cultural appropriation in food?
Sure, of course.
And I have to make a quick announcement, which is, sorry, just because I know you're going to take a minute. So we're going to take some questions from the audience, and the way it's going to work is there are 2 mics here, so you guys will line up, and then we'll call on you, and we love to always know who people are, so if you don't mind telling us who you are, and then you're asking
What your
a question.
sign is, too.
Yeah,
I was going to ask me a sign.
Would
but
you
anyway,
pay $250 for an astrologer?
Exactly.
Yes.
Anyway, so go ahead.
This is a thing that, it comes up a lot. Nobody has a good answer for what it is, and some people are more sensitive to it than others. But, I mean, you're an Iranian American woman cooking Italian food, and you cooked it, were enthusiastically cooking it.
Fluently speaking as well,
also,
like
speaking
blowing my
fluent
mind,
Italian. What in food is it really? Is it me? Is it me being
a good
mad
question.
at the white Mexican place, the white-owned and operated Mexican place around the corner from my house, where everything in the restaurant is cooked by actual Mexicans? Like, is it a question of like where the money that I'm paying for this food, who it goes to, who it enriches, who it keeps alive?
Or is it like this sort of masquerading of discovery, which is like, try this turmeric latte with ignoring, and I say that I will drink a turmeric latte, but I'm saying like ignoring
But
that there is this
Christopher Columbus
rich
your
history.
turmeric latte on
Right,
me.
that's what I'm saying. Like don't act like you just discovered this ancient ass spice.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Come on now, y'all didn't discover that.
But I mean, do you have some sort of working?
I'm working on it. I have
Thinking
some
about-
ideas about it. I think a lot of it has to do with who gets the credit and who gets the money. And I say that, like, for example, as a person who grew up, in 2nd grade, I was called a terrorist at school because it was during, like, Iran-Contra times. In my kids made fun of the food that I brought because it looked brown or green or whatever. It didn't look, and I liked the food enough, like, that part didn't hurt my feelings, it's fine. But, like, I grew up knowing that I was different and that my culture was different and still loving the food. My family, like, we would drive 100 miles to go to a Persian restaurant, and sit in this place and eat Persian food on the weekends, and it was it's a taste for me. It's a thing I've spent my whole life eating. A huge plate of rice and kebabs is $18, right? I've never seen white people in those restaurants in any numbers, and now there are restaurants. So here's 2 great examples. There's a restaurant, a really sweet restaurant, run by 2 beautiful women in LA, that one of their most popular dishes is tahdig, is Persian crispy rice. And they have really cute branding and really, high, they probably have great publicists and the whole thing, right? It's the typical, it's a restaurant, could be in I don't know, Fort Greene, right? And you go there and you get a little tiny plate of tahdig. I don't know how much it costs, maybe $16. If you got that same plate of tahdig in a Persian restaurant, it would be $4. But no one goes to the Persian restaurant. And on the other hand, Sofre just opened up in Park Slope this incredible Persian restaurant that has the most beautiful aesthetic. It's the woman who owns it. She was reviewed in the New Yorker, in the Times. Melissa Clark wrote about her in the food section. She has wanted to have she's Iranian. She's wanted to have a restaurant her whole life. She's been a home cook, and she's the consummate hostess. The prices are not cheap, but she's an amazing lover of film, and then when you go into the downstairs bathroom, there's Persian films playing, and upstairs it's all, you have to go, you guys have to go.
Let's go.
So that's a version of this thing too. We went in there, and my eyes fell out of my head. She came over, I was like, I've never seen this many white people eating Persian food. And they were loving it, and I'm so glad about that.
Yeah.
And I'm even glad that in this restaurant in LA, people eat it, but are they able to link that back to, oh, this comes from a culture that has a 3,000-year-old culinary tradition,
Right.
and I'm going to have respect for that culture
Right.
and those people. And that, I think when that message gets lost, when that credit isn't given, that's a big part of the appropriation, I think. I don't know. I'm still developing my definition, but yeah.
Well, that's helpful.
That's
I mean,
helpful.
Yeah.
It's we can keep talking
But I
about
still
this.
go to this place. I mean, we all do. It's
Yeah.
but I think we just need to talk about, it's not, to me, we have to just keep talking.
Asking
Yeah.
the question
Yeah.
is
And
yes.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
All right, so questions.
Are there questions?
There are mics.
Oh, good. There are people. I was like, there's no one at the mics. Like, how do people not have questions? Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Kimberly.
Hi,
I
everybody.
can- you already know the
Oh,
name.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
Are you
I planted her.
I was gonna say.
I don't.
This manifestation journey is too much to me.
I would be honored to be in the Manifestation Journal. I'm Kimberly. I live in Brooklyn. I'm a Gemini, Libra
Yeah.
rising,
So you-
Moon in Sagittarius.
Do you listen to the show? You must listen to the
I
show.
do, I
You
do.
come up here with your star signs. Okay. I'm like, okay.
Samin, what is something that you love teaching other people to cook, and what is something that you've loved learning how to cook, whether from a person, a cookbook, or somewhere else?
I love teaching people to properly roast vegetables because I think it's a really big game changer.
Yes.
And I think if you you know how to get them brown on the outside and tender on the inside and salted perfectly, you know that suddenly you can do it with any vegetable. You can make 2 sheet pans and eat for the next 4 days. You know, that one is a big one, I think. Because also, I didn't grow up loving vegetables per se, you know, and so it's a great joy of mine to give people the tools and keys to love vegetables themselves. That's a big one. What have I loved learning to make? Oh, you know what? I just went to LA and I learned how to make flour tortillas at this taqueria called Sonora Town. And that was mind-blowing, amazing experience of total deliciousness. And it was really an incredible gift that they gave me because they taught me in person there. And it seemed so easy. And then I went home, the same day I flew home, and I was like, I'm gonna do what they just taught me. I went and bought the ingredients, and it didn't work at all. And then and it was this journey, and I had to spend a lot of time thinking about it, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that they had used Mexican flour, but I write my recipes for people to be able to make them from any grocery store anywhere in the country, and I didn't want to use this specialty flour. And understanding that these two flours, like regular all-purpose flour, is so different, and being able to connect the dots of how these guys who own this little taqueria drive to Mexico once a month to pick up flour, and often they're stopped at the border coming back and have to forfeit the flour. It's, can you imagine taking a 6-hour drive to buy flour for your tortillas because you want to keep your prices low for your community and you don't want to artificially or have to inflate them because you're buying artisanal Mexican flour grown in Arizona. It's a whole story. It was so moving, but yet it was also the most delicious thing ever. So, yeah, highly recommend.
That is a story for you.
I was gonna say,
I
want to read about that.
Yeah, I just wrote the column. It's in the New York
Okay.
Times Magazine.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love how we're all just like plug, but not really. Pay our bills.
Hi, I'm Ari. I'm also Gemini. I was wondering, you were talking about the experience of trying to bring some of your techniques and experience from fancy food world to your mom's cooking, and I'm wondering if there's anything, whether it's techniques or just ways of combining flavor or texture that you've brought from Persian cooking to fancy food world.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I would say my number one thing is I put herbs in everything. That massive amounts of herbs, I believe them to be the that's how you finish any dish, is a huge pile of herbs. And that's like how any Iranian meal begins, with a basket of herbs. So we just eat them by the handful. So that's a big one. And also, this isn't so much that, I'm skirting your question a little bit, but this is this really amazing thing that I heard recently that moved me a lot, which was there's a chef and writer named Tunde Wei from Nigeria, and he's kind of this like performance chef / activist writer. And he was talking about how he's not professionally trained. And so he was making in a restaurant, or it was some catering event with many fancy chefs. He was making plantains, and he was making a groundnut stew the way that like his grandmother or aunt had taught him, which involved holding the plantain. Every Nigerian woman holds the plantain in her hand and cuts the plantain in her hand like this. And so, but that's a technique that like any Western cook would be like recoil at, But because the plantain is hard in a certain way and you hold the knife in a certain way, that's the right way to do it for that ingredient, even if it's not like right according to Western tradition. And so he made this dish, he made this stew, and at the end of it, the fancy chef was like, oh, you ruined it, it's broken. Like we need to fix this, because breaking is a term for when an emulsion, so like a creamy thing, separates and the fat comes on top and floats on top. So they were looking at the stew that he had made, and she said, oh, it's broken, the fat's all floating on top. We need to re-emulsify it, make it creamy again. And he said, what are you talking about? Like, that's what it's meant to be. Like in our culture, the fat on top is the way you want it. So just because your narrow definition of what's right, this doesn't fit into that. And so there are a lot of things like that where I am sort of going back in my mind and remembering ways that as a young cook, like I was taught or told or given the messages that things that the way my mom did it or my grandma did it wasn't right. It was just that it was different. And so, and there are often, especially when a granny's doing it or a mom who like has to do it every day, all day for 30 years, they also develop their own efficiencies. So if my mom's doing it in a way and it doesn't look like the way, I remember one day when I was a baby cook, my mom came up to Berkeley and like spent the day in the kitchen with me and the chefs. And our task that we gave her that was so simple, I thought, was to peel these potatoes that were roasted, because we were gonna fry them to get like crispy on the outside. And she just was like, why would you ever spend this much time? Like, she was like, I'm not doing it. She literally just like, I love her.
I'm not doing this.
And then she goes back across the other way. Yeah.
100%. That was really good, really good. So I think there's a thing too, I think like home cooking is not restaurant cooking, and they are different, and they both have validity and value. And I'm doing my best to figure out how to talk about that.
Yeah, but also what you're talking about is just the work of our lifetime, which is just undoing dominant narratives and unlearning, and acknowledging that there is a dominant culture that doesn't always serve us. We don't have to listen to it, and like I don't know, I love hearing you speak on that, because I feel like it is the most important collective work we can do.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
One more. It's this side, yeah.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Tamara. I'm a Sagittarius. Fire, all fire. In the fat episode, there is this hilarious moment where you're handed this piece of lardo, and before putting it in your mouth, you say, "I'm sorry, Grandma."
Yes,
And I laughed out loud because it was amazing, but also familiar. I'm Palestinian and of Muslim heritage, and I feel guilty every time I eat spaghetti carbonara and so many other things. And I just wonder how you navigated coming from constraints or sort of, place where the culture said or the faith tradition said, don't eat things. It's clear you've transcended that.
She slaughtered a pig, y'all.
Yeah, you were all up in there. So talk about that, but then also, have you ever gone like, Mom, it's so good. Like, just try this. Have you ever tried to convert your
The good news, well,
believers?
I don't know if this is necessarily good news, but the news in my family is that my mom, so my grandmother, my mom's mom, is a Hajj, which is like a person who's gone to Mecca. She's done the journey twice. She is considered a great, like, Muslim, right? And when she comes to the States, she's like, I want my pepperoni pizza, I want my Oscar Mayer hot dog, like, I want to go to Las Vegas and gamble, give me some whiskey. Like, she's like, so like there's a crack in the door. Do you know what I mean? And like my mom, but there were sort of baseline rules, like we just didn't eat pork. And I had never even seen pork until I was probably 2 years into cooking when I sort of realized like, I'm gonna have to start doing this and eating this and cooking this if I'm gonna commit to this thing. And it wasn't, I've never been religious, so it wasn't so much a religious choice, but it was more like, how intensely am I like displeasing my ancestors and my family? Also, wine is another one. Like there was never any alcohol in my house growing up. And so I still kind of can't really even drink a glass of wine in front of my mom. My brothers don't care, like, yeah. But I just am like too good. I don't know, so. And I definitely conflicted in certain moments about it. I don't know, do you ever get over your family telling you not to do something and you're doing it? I don't know.
I'm over it.
Yeah.
That was a great question.
It's a great question.
That's a good question. Is there anything that you don't eat?
I'll eat anything, but I will say through this week with like so many interviews, I've like sort of, I'm kind of surprisingly squeamish. Like, I'll eat anything. I'll taste anything. If you cook it and hand it to me, I will eat it, like as a sign of respect, no matter what. But in the fat episode at the farmer's market, we were there and we went to the fisherman's stand, and he had like woken up that morning super early and driven 400 kilometers to bring us, you know, bring these things to the market, and they were so beautiful and fresh, and so he was trying to impress us. And he handed me this live shrimp. And he was like, here, eat this. And I was like, okay. And I did it. And then, and like I was like, forced myself to, my eyes filled with tears. And I had to like go calm myself. So I ran behind his truck. But you know, it's a documentary, so there's a camera has to follow me. And I kept like nodding to the camera guy. I was like, don't come here.
Can I just say, the woman who made your show used to edit me at the New York Times.
Or her sister.
and-
No, her sister
Or
did.
sorry.
Yeah.
So Caroline.
Caroline Sue is the wonderful and very creative
is
director
very
of our
well
show.
made. She's very good at her job. But that sounds like a moment. That sounds like a Mary thing, where like Mary would also do a similar thing if I tried to run it, like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
either
yeah.
get rid of a live shrimp that I had and whatever.
Yeah.
It just sounded very familiar. to
Yeah.
me. Who's got the next question?
On this side, I think. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jen. I think I'm a tourist, but I haven't looked it up since the signs changed like 10 years ago. Very behind the times.
Jenna, did you know the signs had changed?
They're always changing. We'll just do it.
Something changed. Something changed.
the Earth is
for
so
sure. For sure,
Because
something
the Earth
changed.
is slowing down. It's like
So
we'll do an episode on it. We'll do an episode. We actually did get our sign. We gotta. So you can get your signs read in tandem. Like if you're, starting a new partnership or in a relationship, a romantic one. Usually, you can be like, how do our star maps align? And we got ours done, and they were like, you will always be in charge, and you will always have to wrangle this one. And so far, it's mostly true. Okay, sorry.
So two things. One, I just want to say thank you because I fucking love your cookbook. I read
Aw,
it cover
thank
to
you.
cover. And
It's so good. It's really good.
I got made fun of a lot for having that as my bedside reading. But I was wondering, because you got your start in restaurants, and especially in the moment we're in now, there's a lot of controversy behind restaurants and the hierarchy that's there and what happens as a woman in that industry. And
This is a thing we didn't talk about. But
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so
Thank
I'm
you.
just
Yeah.
curious, I guess in the minute 32 that we have left here, do you recommend that people still start there? Or like, are you more hesitant in your
a good
approach
question.
to recommending, or when you're talking to people that do want to get involved in that?
I don't think anyone should work in a restaurant anymore, but that's all. But I'm just a particularly jaded person. But
that
it's not
for that
because
reason?
not for that reason. Just because
okay.
I think restaurants are really brutal. And if you have any other thing that you could possibly ever do in your life, you should do that. But
Front of house and back of house?
that's separate. That's separate. Both. Don't do
Both,
it.
okay.
But I would say more for cook. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
my just like particular thing. I do actually send a lot of young people into restaurants, and I think hopefully, again, because now this is a topic of conversation, we are all more aware of it, and it's something that we can discuss. I struggle, like I have been deeply embroiled in our local controversies in California, and it's a thing that, and I think a lot about it because I know people who have been really negatively affected by it, and again, it's about putting your money I think as a diner, it's certainly about putting, who do you want to support with your dollars? And what kind of choices do you want to make? And I mean, 9 seconds. I can't, I'm going to explode if we really get into it. But like, I think there is a lot of compassion, a misplaced compassion for perpetrators of harassment, and a lot of missing compassion for people who have experienced it. And also, you know, one of the narratives is often like, but this XYZ restaurateur like has worked his career so hard to build this thing and he will lose so much money. But what's never talked about is the work that, you know, that these women and people have lost often, and the ways that they have been financially affected, and that often it's many dozens or hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And so
It's real. Thank you for that question.
thank you.
Thank you for all your questions.
We're out of time, but
Yeah.
thank you for coming. Thank you, Samin.
Thank you guys.
So,
Why are they standing?
the show's on Netflix right now. It's really good. It's like, and you know the thing that, oh, can I say something really quick? You know what happened when I finished Heat, which is, I watched them in order. Heat's the last one. Do you know what they tried to recommend to me? Some UFC cage fighting documentary. So I don't know where that came from, what the
Based on
algorithm
your
is trying to do.
viewing habits.
yeah.
That has nothing to do with Samin. That's all
Okay,
you.
I don't know what Netflix knows about me, but whatever. The show's on Netflix. It is fantastic. You guys should all watch it. I mean,
Thank
I'm
you for
sure you're
coming.
here. You probably will. Thanks for coming.